On today's show, Larry Nance Jr. is coming home. Plus, did the Cavs not offer Ty Jerome a contract this summer? We'll talk about that. Plus, some interesting moves that other teams in the Eastern Conference have made so far in free agency and how they affect Cleveland. We'll do all that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube as we get started here, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On Tuesday, the Cleveland Cavaliers made their first outside addition via signing, or I guess with a free agent, because the move is not yet official and cannot be official quite yet, but they have agreed to terms with Larry Nance Jr. to come back to Cleveland. Nance Jr., of course, was drafted originally by the Los Angeles Lakers, was acquired via trade for the Cleveland Cavaliers from LA at the trade deadline in 2018, spent a few seasons in Cleveland, and then was ultimately part of the sign and trade maneuver that brought Lauri Markkanen to Cleveland, and then has since played in New Orleans and Atlanta after playing in Portland. And now, after reaching free agency this summer, he has decided to come back to Cleveland. And of course, this will be on a veterans minimum contract because that is all the Cavs are able to give to free agents. But I think that this move is a very good one for the Cavs for a number of different reasons that I want to dive into. But first and foremost, I don't know that the Cavs could have done much better in terms of finding the right fit on both ends of the floor and the right talent on both ends of the floor and somebody that's going to fit in that well in this locker room too on a veterans minimum. The Cavs in free agency are playing at a disadvantage because they cannot spend money in free agency the way just about every other team, I believe, other than the Phoenix Suns right now, can. Because of where the Cavs are at financially, they cannot spend more than a minimum contract on an outside free agent. Of course, this does not mention what they can do with their own free agents. Like they could spend $9.5 million on Sam Merrill because he was an existing free agent with the team. They have his bird rights. They could have paid Ty Jerome what he was offered and accepted with the Memphis Grizzlies, but chose not to. And we will talk about that coming up next segment too. But for an outside free agent, for a free agent that played for a different team last year, the most money they could offer is a minimum. And getting Larry Nance Jr., and I talked about him, I think it was on yesterday's podcast. I don't remember if it was yesterday's podcast or Monday's podcast, but I talked about him as a potential fit for the Cavs. And of course, I knew there was interest. I knew there was mutual interest. And I think there was always going to be interest more so on Larry's side. I wasn't necessarily 100% sure where the Cavs stood on things, but I did think that there would always be that allure of playing at home again, because as you all know, if you're listening to this podcast, Larry Nance Jr. is from Northeast Ohio. He grew up here. He went to high school here. Like he grew up a Cavs fan. Obviously, his dad played for this organization. His brother Pete has at times been part of this organization too. I think the Cavs, and I don't know Larry at all, but I do think it's fair to say that the Cavs mean a lot to him and his family. Like his dad, Larry Sr., is at Cavs games all the time, even when Pete is not with the Cavs or when Larry is not with the Cavs. Like you see Larry Nance Sr. at Cavs games pretty frequently. So I do think it's a fair thing to say that this organization does mean a lot to Larry and to his family as a whole. So I did expect there to be the allure of being able to play at home again, especially while playing for a contender. When Nance was in Cleveland the first time, the first few months, obviously, he was part of a team that went to the finals. He played in the NBA finals with a Cavs uniform on, and I'm sure that is a very special thing. But then once LeBron left, the teams were not very good really until he left. He was there for the 3 bad seasons between LeBron, and then when the Cavs went to the play-in and won 44 games, they traded him before that season started. So outside of that first half of a year and playoff run in Cleveland, Larry didn't experience much team success. But now having the opportunity to be back in his home area, playing for the team that he, of course, grew up rooting for, that has such a connection to his family, while also playing for a championship, I always thought would have a pretty strong allure to him. Now, what surprised me about this is that this got done so quickly, because if you listen to yesterday's podcast, one of the things I talked about with Larry potentially being a guy that the Cavs could sign was, once you are a guy that's on a minimum contract, it's really difficult to stop being on a minimum contract, particularly once you've made money and then you hit free agency and you don't get a deal out there that puts you above that. It can be hard to get out of that cycle. It is why, and I know I mentioned this, it is why you don't often see veteran players until they start being like ring chasers. You don't see them take buyouts, because then you become a minimum guy, and it's hard to not be a minimum guy once you are that. So I did expect this to take longer than it did, because I did think that Larry would be looking for a better contract offer than what the Cavs are allowed to offer him. Obviously, this moved quicker than I thought it would, and I think it's a great thing for the Cavs, because of what I think that he can bring to the floor is pretty much everything the Cavs need. I maybe haven't been shouting from the mountaintops about needing a third big, but I did view him as the perfect third big. And I think the biggest thing from a basketball perspective that is appealing about Larry Nance is, I'm a little torn, actually, because I think the team building philosophy Kobe Altman and the Cavs are showing this offseason is very clear. And I want to talk about that more next when I talk about Ty Jerome and what he posted on his Instagram on Tuesday. But for Larry individually, I do think the fact that he can play both alongside Jarrett Allen and alongside Evan Mobley is a very important thing. I don't necessarily consider Dean Wade a big. I have always thought of him as a bigger wing, but I've always thought of him as a wing player, where I do think of Larry Nance Jr. as a big. But having him be able to play both the 4 alongside Jarrett Allen and the 5 alongside Evan Mobley, I think is something that adds to his value with the Cavs. Because I don't think the Cavs should always be playing 2 bigs. I think that there should be minutes where Evan Mobley is playing center and neither Jarrett Allen nor Larry Nance Jr. is on the floor. I think that should still be part of who the Cavs are. But I think the fact that you could play Larry Nance Jr. at the 4 next to Jarrett Allen, or you could even play him at the 4 next to Evan Mobley if you'd like. And I know that the immediate pushback would be, well, Kenny Atkinson always says guys aren't necessarily playing specific positions. They have certain roles that they do, which sounds a lot like positions to me, but they don't think of it that way. They don't think of who's playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 while they're on the floor. So I do understand that aspect of it. But I think that the versatility that he can provide is really important for the Cavs. And I think that this is something that can make them better. They did need this depth piece. And I don't know if Tristan Thompson's going to be back. I would imagine that he is. When he spoke at the end of the season for his exit interviews, he talked like somebody that wants to keep playing, that he enjoys being in that role that carries a lot of mentorship that he's done in Cleveland for the last couple of years. I would imagine if the Cavs have a roster spot, Tristan Thompson will have that spot. That is just kind of what I think. And I think that's a little understood, but I don't know that that's going to happen for sure. I'm not reporting that is just an opinionated thing. But I do think that this gives them a much more serviceable third big man. And that is an area where they have absolutely not been at their best over the last couple of years. I did think, a couple of years ago before the suspension, Tristan Thompson was very serviceable for the Cavs, and I thought he did some very good things for them. But like this year, he wasn't necessarily somebody that they played very often or that was a big part of their game plan. They would play him sporadically. When Evan missed time, he would play a little bit. But overall, I just think that this is something that can help change who the Cavs are a little bit for the better. It gives them depth at a place where I think they were a little thin on depth. And I know that there was a large section of the fan base that probably felt a little bit more passionate about needing this than I did, because I just ultimately think the Cavs are still going to be at their best when Evan Mobley is the one big on the floor playing center. But I do think that Larry Nance Jr. is somebody that you can take right now. And we can't fast forward to the second round of the playoffs in May next year, but he is somebody that will be in the playoff rotation. And to find a guy like that on a minimum contract on the first or the second day of free agency, which yesterday was, to find a guy like that on the second day of free agency, I think is a very, very big win. I think it's a great job by Kobe Altman. I think it's a great job by this front office. And I think it's a really cool thing that Larry Nance Jr. gets to come home to Cleveland, or I guess more accurately, Northeast Ohio, because he is from Akron. I think it's a very, very cool thing for him to get to come home to Northeast Ohio and be on a championship caliber team. I think that Cavs fans should be excited. And ultimately, I don't know that they could have found a better fit for this one specific need in terms of player, in terms of cultural fit, and in terms of a guy willing to take the minimum on July 1st. I think all of that for what the Cavs are allowed to operate with, this is, I think, about as good of a move as they can make in free agency within the guardrails that they are allowed to make a move. Now, the guy that left in free agency, Ty Jerome, now a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. I gave my thoughts on that on yesterday's show, but Ty Jerome gave some thoughts on that on his Instagram. I'll read what he said. We'll talk about what it means, and I will tell you why I think we got to this point. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, managing your money can feel easier. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It is like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's so much more than that. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending right in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building your wealth. Maybe you are, for the first time, in a serious relationship. Maybe you just got married, and maybe now you have shared accounts. That can be something that could, on the surface, seem to be really stressful. Well, with Monarch Money, they make it so seamless and easy that it takes away a lot of the stress. Maybe you've got some financial goals that you really want to hit. Monarch can help put together a plan so that you can reach those financial goals and continue to build your wealth. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON NBA for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. So as we know, Ty Jerome no longer a member of the Cavs. He's the guy that the Cavs have lost so far in free agency. None of their other free agents have signed elsewhere. I would imagine that all of their other free agents, if they are in the NBA next year, are guys that will be on minimum contracts between Javonte Green and Chuma Okeke. If Tristan Thompson is elsewhere, I would imagine it's going to be on a minimum. So Ty Jerome is the one guy that they lost that signed for significant money somewhere else. And I talked about this on yesterday's show, that part of what Ty can get, and I did not know what the Cavs did or did not offer. I still don't know, but I know what Ty is saying here. I thought a big part of this was that the Cavs can't offer Ty playing time the way that Memphis could. Well, Ty posted on his Instagram story. He reshared a fan account that said, thank you for everything, Ty Jerome, with a nice picture of Ty. And Ty reposted it to a story with the caption, Cleveland, this past year will always hold a special place in my heart. Although I was never presented with the option of returning, nor did last season end how I wanted to, I will never forget all that this year brought. That to me is very interesting. I think we all expected the Cavs to at least make a bid to bring Ty Jerome back. But if this is true, and I don't have reason to not believe Ty, if this is true, I think this sort of confirms the way the Cavs are building this team. And I talked about this the other day, that the trade of Isaac Okoro for Lonzo Ball wasn't necessarily just, a challenge trade. And yes, they are betting on Lonzo Ball's health, and they're betting on Larry Nance Jr.'s health too, because he didn't play a ton of games for the Atlanta Hawks last year. But the Cavs, what the shift that I think they're making in terms of their team building philosophy is, I think they want to have as few players in the rotation as possible that are one-way players. Because for as good as Ty Jerome was offensively last year, and yes, I know that was not the case in the postseason. He was not very good against the Indiana Pacers. He was fine against the Miami Heat, but I don't know that I want to necessarily call that the postseason. Like, that Miami Heat team was not a playoff caliber opponent, but he was not very good against the Indiana Pacers. But he is at no point considered a good defender. Now, he had steals at times earlier in the year, and I think that teams kind of figured out, okay, Ty Jerome's going to do this. This is how you counter that. And those Ty Jerome steals kind of stopped happening. Isaac Okoro is a good defender, but he is somebody that, as I've mentioned several times here, somebody that opposing teams are just not going to defend in the postseason. And Lonzo Ball, if he is healthy, is somebody that is going to be a positive on both ends of the floor. Sam Merrill is somebody that the Cavs look at as a positive on both ends of the floor. They view him as a good defender, and they view him as somebody offensively, even when he's not hitting shots. I think they view him as somebody that creates more gravity than very many people. And I know the Gary Trent Jr. contract that he signed with the Milwaukee Bucks was less, and like his shooting percentages are higher than Sam's, but I also do think there's a little bit more value in a movement shooter that Sam is than maybe Gary Trent Jr., who's not quite as much of a movement shooter. So I think that is something to consider. Like the Cavs, and I'm not saying that they're right or wrong here, but the Cavs find a lot of value in that specific style of player that Sam is offensively and defensively too. They, I think, are always going to be higher. And I am personally higher on consensus with Sam too, but the Cavs are going to be higher on Sam Merrill than the consensus is. And then Larry Nance Jr. is another one. Like, he is not an elite player on either end of the floor. Elite players on either end of the floor don't sign minimum contracts, but he's a good player on both ends of the floor. And what this has done now, if you go up and down what we expect the Cavs rotation to be this season, obviously we know the key players, who they're going to be. You've got Darius Garland, you've got Donovan Mitchell, DeAndre Hunter. I don't know if he's going to start or not. Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Sam Merrill, Dean Wade, obviously now Larry Nance Jr., Max Strus. You look at this and say, okay, how many guys do they have that if the 2026 playoffs started tomorrow, and of course they don't, it is July 2nd right now, but if the playoffs started tomorrow, how many guys in the Cavs rotation are one-way guys? How many guys in the Cavs rotation are liabilities on either end of the floor? Because for as good as Ty was, I do think he was a liability defensively. For as good as Isaac was defensively, I do think he was a liability offensively in the postseason. I think you could make the case that Darius Garland is a liability defensively. I think he's a little bit better than he's given credit for. Now, he's never going to be considered a good defender, but I do think that the effort is there, and I think he's a smart enough defender. I do think that because he's so small, he's always going to be a target. I think Donovan Mitchell is a better defender than him. But other than that, if you look at Jarrett Allen, now he's not an offensive spacer, but he's a good offensive player. Obviously, we know what he brings defensively. Evan Mobley, like there's not a discussion there to be had. He's great on both ends of the floor. Just got done talking about Sam Merrill. Dean Wade might be the other one where he's not aggressive enough offensively. Like he might be, and I struggle to call him an offensive liability. I just don't think he's aggressive enough. And I think that is why teams maybe don't defend him very tough. Max Strus is not a liability on either end. DeAndre Hunter is not a liability on either end. Larry Nance Jr. is not a liability on either end. The vision that the Cavs are putting forth this summer is they want to be a team that is filled with two-way guys. They want to be a team that however deep their playoff rotation is, when next May arrives and the playoffs begin for real for them, because as I have said several times, the first round is going to be just get through it for them. They'll win a first round series. It is all but a formality for them next season. And it should be because they're going to be really, really good again. But when they get to the second round of the playoffs and strive to get past the second round of the playoffs for the first time as a group, how many guys do they have that are going to be in their rotation that you look at and say, that guy is a liability on one end of the floor? Maybe Darius Garland. Maybe Darius Garland defensively. I think liability is probably a little strong for him. I don't think he's a good defender, but I don't know that liability is the answer. So that to me, if the Cavs did not offer Ty Jerome a contract, I think that's why. I think that's why, because that would have been one, let's say they would have given him the same contract Memphis gave him. It would have been so much more than just that raw number because of the tax bill that comes along with it. And is it worth paying a one-way player, which Ty is, that amount of money? And I think that the answer for the Cavs is no. And I think if the Cavs, as Ty says they did not, and again, I have no reason to not believe Ty Jerome here. If the Cavs did not offer Ty Jerome a contract, I think it's because they want to have a roster that is filled with two-way players. And Ty Jerome, for as good as he was offensively, in 20 minutes a game, is not a two-way player. And that's what the Cavs need, because they saw up close that's what wins in the playoffs. They need to be a team that can go offense and defense and not have to worry about a drop-off depending on who's on the floor. And I'm just not so sure that Ty Jerome accomplishes that goal for them. Now, there have been a lot of movement in the Eastern Conference. There's a few teams I like, a few teams I'm very curious about. Let's talk briefly about the state of the East. We're going to do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. So the Eastern Conference has maybe not been shaken up so much, but I do think teams view the Eastern Conference as one right now that there is opportunity for upward mobility. I think you have to look no further than what the Atlanta Hawks have done, because Atlanta has sensed this moment and said, we are going for it right now. I still personally, while I like a lot of what Atlanta has done, I don't view them as a threat to the Cavs. I still think that as of right now, as of 11:10 at night on Tuesday, July 1st, I think the Eastern Conference is a 3-team race. I think the Cavs right now are still the best team in the East. And then I think it's the New York Knicks. And then I think it's the Orlando Magic. And then I think there's a gap between them and the next best team, which is probably Atlanta, maybe Detroit. Detroit obviously has had some issues pop up with Malik Beasley. They were, it sounds like, going to sign him to a 3-year deal worth $42 million. And now he's under federal investigation for sports gambling. So that is not a deal that I would expect to get done anytime soon. Indiana, not going to be the same. Obviously, Tyrese Halliburton, and now losing Miles Turner. Milwaukee, what Milwaukee did on Tuesday was wildly interesting. Damian Lillard, of course, who spent 2 seasons in Milwaukee and tore his Achilles, was waived by the Milwaukee Bucks, and they're going to stretch his contract out. So now, instead of having him for the duration of his contract, which I believe was 2 more seasons, they're going to be they will pay him his money, and it will count against the cap, I believe, $22 million per year in dead cap for the next 5 years. So whatever the cap figure is in the NBA, you can subtract $22 million from that every year, and that is what the Milwaukee Bucks have to work with. They're going to be spending against the salary cap $22 million per year to not have Damian Lillard on their team. Now, they signed Miles Turner, which I think in a vacuum is a very nice move for them. Miles Turner is a very good player. I do think it is ironic that for the 10 years Miles Turner was in Indiana, there were trade rumors about him, and we all assumed he was going to go back to the Pacers, and now is when he left. But this is, I think, happening because the Pacers don't want to pay the luxury tax, because at their core, the Indiana Pacers are a frugal franchise. They do not spend money. I believe they have been in the luxury tax one time in their history. And once Tyrese Halliburton went down with that Achilles injury, they were not going to make next season, in which they're not going to be very good, year number 2 in the luxury tax. But this, to me, from a Milwaukee perspective, it screams of desperation. I don't think the Bucks are going to be all that great. They'll probably, again, be somewhere 4, 5, 6 in the East. I think their ceiling as a regular season team, probably 4th. But I don't look at this team, one, as a threat to the Cavs, despite the fact they have the best player in the conference in Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I don't look at them as a title contender. If anything, I think the Cavs should be thrilled about this move, because I don't think that the Cavs' runway is just next year. Like, I do think that they will still be a team competing for a championship 2 years from now, maybe 3 years from now. I don't know what the financial stuff is going to look like at that point. But the point is, when Tyrese Halliburton gets back and back to being Tyrese Halliburton, the Pacers now are going to look much different and probably not as good because they lost Miles Turner. The Milwaukee Bucks, while making a desperate move for themselves to try and appease Giannis, and then, of course, reporting came out from Chris Haynes that Giannis was not very happy that they waived Damian Lillard. By trying to appease Giannis, the Milwaukee Bucks, what I think they actually did was kind of appease the rest of the Eastern Conference. Because I do think there's a case to be made that for the next handful of seasons, the window's shut on the Indiana Pacers today. Now, they can find ways to make moves next summer and hope Tyrese Halliburton gets back to health. But I think the Milwaukee Bucks did the Cavs a favor. I think the Milwaukee Bucks did the New York Knicks a favor. I think the Milwaukee Bucks did the Orlando Magic, the Detroit Pistons, the Atlanta Hawks. I think a favor was done to those teams today by the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that's what this move was. I do think it was desperate. I like the move in vacuum, but they're no closer to a championship. They're not. They don't have perimeter creation. They don't have good perimeter defenders. Giannis is great. Miles Turner, very, very good player. Outside of that, that roster leaves a lot to be desired. Now, maybe they're not done. Maybe they have another trick up their sleeve. I don't know. But I think that the Cavs right now have done a good job on the margins. Yes, I understand being upset that Ty Jerome is no longer on the Cavs. But right now, I look at the Cavs as the best team in the Eastern Conference. The odds reflect that. As I record this, they are the Eastern Conference favorites, and they have the second best odds, only behind Oklahoma City via FanDuel, to win the NBA title this year. Maybe there are teams that, compared to what they were last year, have improved more than the Cavs have improved. But I do think we have to remember, because of everything else that has happened in the East, all these teams are chasing the Cavs. And you would much rather be the team being chased than the team doing the chasing. But thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. And every day you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, as we get out of here, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking more about the Cavs.